Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the regular meeting of Fernie City Council held at 6:30 p.m. on April 9th, 2024. Kiisukukit, I'd like to acknowledge that the city of Fernie is located within Kukinamakis, the unceded territory of the Yakutat Nucleate. We recognize that we live and work in their vast lands. Akanahunik are from Yakutat Nucleate and are members of the Tanaha-speaking peoples of British Columbia, Idaho, and Montana. I'll call the meeting to order and ask for a mover and a seconder that the agenda for the regular meeting of April 9th be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Nixon. Any discussion? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. I'll now ask for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the March 26th regular council meeting be adopted. Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. I'll now open the floor and our online forum for public participation and invite the public in attendance or participating electronically who wish to comment on items listed on the meeting agenda in accordance with section 3.7.3 of the procedure bylaw to address council, except speakers must not address council regarding a matter for which a public hearing must be held or has been held pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of the matter or adoption of the bylaw. Speakers must not address council regarding a permit for which public notice must be given or has been given pursuant to the Local Government Act prior to council's consideration of issuance of the permit. Any speaker may only address council for a maximum of 3 minutes. And I'll turn to Ms. Rhodes. No one has indicated an interest to speak. So we will move along to item 10.1, a report from our Director of Finance, Mr. Burdett.
Thank you, Mayor Elgin. No presentation for me tonight, just the report in your agenda and the bylaw for third reading. Thank you.
Any questions, comments from council? Seeing none, it has been a pretty robust process to get us this far. I will ask Mr. McConnell to read the recommendation.
Thank you, Your Worship. The recommendation is that the 5-year financial plan 2024 to 2028 bylaw number 2510/2024 be given third reading.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor McIsaac. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Myself, Councillor McIsaac, Councillor Hamilton, and Councillor Nixon. And those opposed? Councillor Shoesmith and Councillor Audia Kelly. Once again, Mr. Burdett, thank you for your work on that. I know it's a heavy lift, and I appreciate all the work that you and your team have done. We'll move on to item 10.2, a report from our Manager of Planning, Mr. Simolini. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council. I think it actually took me longer to set that up than it will for me to present. So tonight we're just looking at bylaw 2507 for 1292 4th Avenue to rezone from R1 to R1B. As council may recall, this did come forward previously. It was given, the application was approved and it was given first and second reading. And unfortunately, we had to rescind first and second reading because of the new legislation and us having to give public notice prior to first and second reading. So that public notice has been given, and tonight we're just back for council to give the bylaw first, second, and third reading, given that there's no public hearing to be held. And then at a later meeting, council will be able, if they do first, second, and third tonight, they will be able to adopt the bylaw to rezone to R1 SL. So just briefly, this is consistent with the OCP. That is the main reason why there is no public hearing required for this or allowed for that matter. And our recommendation tonight is just that bylaw 2507 be given first, second, and third readings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simulini. Any questions for Mr. Simulini from council? Seeing none, Mr. McConnell, if you could read the recommendation.
Thank you, Your Worship. The recommendation is that bylaw number 2507 be given first, second, and third readings.
Moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Shoesmith. Any further discussion? All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Simulini.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council.
Item 10.3, a report from Project Manager Line on curbside organics.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry, it seems like my mouse has disappeared. Let's try that. So thank you for that patience. I'm here tonight to talk about some bylaw updates to support the Curbside Organics program. But first I'll start off with where we are in my rollout steps, which you may be familiar of. I last presented this in the February Committee of the Whole meeting. And since then, what has occurred is that our curbside carts and kitchen collector bins are on the way. They're scheduled that they could be here as early as May. Communications and I have been working hard on our communication plan, rollout, and all the items. We're going to be starting to do some teasers online early May and then put out a new fernie.ca/organics and a Let's Talk mid-May. And today I'm really here to talk about bylaw updates, the most fun part of this. So with this update, I was actually able to find 4 things that needed some attention. The first being curbside organics, but also the city operating a landfill, updating some language to be more plain, and cart to curb time. So the first, primarily, we are here because of the new curbside organic service. So a new section had to be added with language really similar to what we used for recycling updates last year. Changes were also made to A, updating the cost of service starting in 2025, and also adding a service charge for the replacement of the bear-resistant organic bins because they are much more costly than our garbage or recycling bins, so they get their own line item. And as discussed in the February 20th Committee of the Whole meeting, no changes will occur for user rates this year. It's not going to go up even though we're starting the service mid-year, but we're going to have to cover that in the following years. We think it's going to cost about $38,000 that the city will be covering for this service to come in this year. And in order to recoup those costs in the future years, what we'd be charging citizens is waste, recycling, organics, plus that payback. And staff is proposing to pay that back within 2 years, which is an additional 73 cents per month per household. Alternatively, we could do a different amount of years of payback. 5 years, for example, is 29 cents per month. So in the bylaw update, I've added the 2-year payback, but if we want to have a discussion, I'm open to that if there is a different payback period that is desired. So one other thing is that obviously we are putting this money forward, and so we're going to be missing out on a little bit of interest by putting this money forward, this $38,000, but it's only about $2,000 per year, so it's very minimal, and it really does help our frontline staff if we do not change the rates this year. Secondly, sections and mentions of the bylaw of the city operating a landfill have been removed as they were actually still there, and we do not operate a landfill anymore. So the language is either removed or updated to reflect that we use the RDEC transfer station instead where that was appropriate. Third, I put in some updates to provide users with easily understood criteria on wildlife attractants and cart storage. We first updated the definition of wildlife attractants, to the BC Wildlife Act definition so that there's no confusion between the two, that we're saying something different than the act we are following. And then we also updated the section that talks about how garbage is stored in homes. Previously, only the garbage itself needed to be stored inaccessibly. That was the attractant. But as we all know, bears see garbage cans as attractants themselves. It's a potential treat. So this update groups together the garbage and the bins needing to be stored in a manner that limits access. And this section was intensely workshopped with many departments, and the chosen wording is presented here on the middle of the screen. Occupants are responsible for the proper and sanitary storage of carts and wildlife attractants on their property. However, I'd like to pause here for a discussion with council, as many of our previous discussions regarding bears and garbage have highlighted the fact that the best way to prevent wildlife interactions and the creation of nuisance bears is to keep those attractants inaccessible. So if council should choose, we could replace that clause with a more prescriptive preventative clause like the lower one on the screen. It would send a stronger message to curbside users about how serious we are on preventing wildlife interactions. And I wanted to, at this point, pause for a discussion.
Council, any thoughts on this? Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. I did actually make some notes on this. My personal preference is to go the more prescriptive route. However, my question is, how would we go about enforcing it? And, thinking of a number of, I guess, particularly main town and area houses that don't necessarily have a garage space or an accessible shed space. How do we enforce it, and what sort of timeline would we give them to get into compliance if that's the route we go?
If I may, those are very good questions. Firstly, yes, not everybody has a garage. But everyone places their bins in a certain area, typically the same area all the time. So we would suggest the building of sheds or fenced areas with a fencing roof. Like there are options. And then we would work on the communications rollout of this change, in that I don't think we'd be very so it makes it easier on the bylaw actually enacting it. If you see a cart out, then you can say, yes, you are in contravention, this is accessible. So actually enforcing it is very easy, instead of the previous clause was more like you had to show that a bear got into it to be able to enforce it. It's already happened, and then you're, So this one is easier to enforce, but I think we would roll it out in a more educational manner, as in, hey, we noticed your cart is out. This is now in contravention with the bylaw. Here's the education. Please put your cart in an inaccessible location.
Yeah, I personally, I struggle with that a little bit, effectively making every property owner in the community who doesn't currently have one build a shed or a secure storage for their bin. We have gone to the higher quality bins for organics to ensure that, to the extent possible, bears can't get into them. I struggle with that a little bit, simply because it's, there's a cost burden for the increased service. And then there's an potential additional cost burden to build a enclosure. And as we've seen particularly in the last year, even a garage is not a guarantee of inaccessibility. There was one garage in the annex where the bear pulled off 2 panels of the garage door to get into the bin. So, I worry a little bit that we're creating a problem for our citizens and creating a problem for ourselves by being more prescriptive in this regard. And I think, as Councillor McIsaac has said more than once, the education is the key in terms of how we're ensuring our citizens understand how to reduce those interactions.
If I may,
Mhm.
we did go with the higher quality bins, but we know that they're only bear resistant for 1 hour. That's what a bear resistant bin is. So it's more for when it's out on the street on the collection day that it would have that chance to
Mhm.
like withstand a bear. It's not intended to be out 24/7.
No,
And
I
that's how our
appreciate that.
bylaw works, that we have a more difficult bin, but it's also stored in a place that is safe for those bins. And for a bear that would break into a garage, we're trying to prevent those bears from happening, from becoming those nuisance bears. Because one bear does not just stroll out of the woods and start breaking into garages. You know that bear's been fed before, and now it is targeting that. So we're trying to limit that from occurring to begin with, so those situations do not occur.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I agree about the education part. I think one of the components that might be missing from the education part is the point that was raised by Project Engineer Lime, which is that a lot of people don't realize that the bin itself, even if it is empty and clean, it has become an attractive because bears have just become used to identifying them as potential food sources. So I think including that education piece is really important. Like you, I worry about the overly prescriptive language that it potentially puts a bunch of people in a challenging situation, and we're already in a change here. Having said that, we do need to get people to a place at some point where bins are not accessible to bears easily. That just has to happen over time. I would suggest for now keeping the current wording that's in there, not going to the more prescriptive wording, increasing the education side, especially with regards to the fact that the bins themselves are attractants and not necessarily the contents simultaneously. But also, I'd like to look at, is it the kind of thing that we could add as part of a response to a regular abuser? Meaning that where we have somebody who refuses to comply with putting the bin out and putting the bin away and keeping it inaccessible and so on, that becomes part of the requirement for them, is you're just going to have to build a fence or a storage location for it as part of the response to a frequent abuser of the problem. Just something to consider. Thank you.
Potentially. Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I tend to agree with you about placing that burden on folks. And then, you know, what about barbecues? What about restaurants? What about all those things? Like the animals will smell those things, right? Maybe the solution is not so much punishing people, education for absolutely sure, but perhaps there's a way to deal with bears. I had a citizen speak to me about Karelian bear dogs, for example. I know we were approached by a citizen who is interested in working on the problem of bears coming into town. So I really hesitate to, you know, I share with you, Your Worship, about putting that financial burden on people. We're already adding to their costs. I think most people are fairly responsible. So to make everyone pay, I don't think that's fair.
Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. I broadly agree with you and Councillor McIsaac. We talk about a burden on people. It's also policing things as a burden on the city itself. So given that we're a limited organization, we should consider that. And I'm happy that Councillor Audie Kelly brought up the bear dogs idea. Their cost benefit, they do the math. If there's even a tiny gain and no risk, why wouldn't they try breaking into stuff? But even a small amount of hazing might actually be helpful. Could be a thing to be looked into. Anyways, thank you.
And they had some success in the Crow's Nest Pass with hazing, using those bear dogs, as I understand. Youth Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I share the same concerns as Councillor Audie Kelly in terms of the wording, but what I wanted to mention was that in the old clause, it kind of talks a little bit at the end about by not complying with the rules of, you know, bringing the bin in and out, you're a risk to the people in the neighborhood or vicinity. Whereas in the two new proposed clauses, that isn't mentioned ever. And I think having that wording that you could be a potential risk to your neighbors would definitely make people want to comply with this a little bit more, because you're not only affecting your own homes and your own safety, it's everybody around you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation. The removal of the safety language was, yeah, that's not insignificant change.
If I may, we are trying to make it a little more firm, I guess. And yes, and that did mean that I did remove that because to be very honest, after 5 years, that wasn't doing anything.
Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. I like the stronger language. I think it's important to have all this stuff put away properly. I think that we're going to see a few people who are going to face a little bit of hardship with having to build something else, but I think it needs to be put away. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a few people. As I go around the community, I think it's a lot of people have their bins sort of resting against their home. They don't currently have a shed or an enclosure. I know of one family who has an enclosure that's been ripped open several times by a bear. So it's, yeah, I worry that the prescriptive language is creating a problem for them and for us in terms of compliance and enforcement. Councilor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. That's where I'm at. I think that the problem people who are not complying and not taking good care of their garbage bins are a really small number.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who don't actually have the capability of storing their bins away in an enclosed environment, who are not a problem, are a much bigger number than that. And I really struggle with, punishing 10% for the actions of 0.5%.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. And keep in mind too, as we build more apartments and multifamilies with limited parking, we're going to see a lot more people in spaces where they're not necessarily able to simply drive some trash to the dump if they have a thing. And this type of language and a punitive attitude might put them in a difficult spot. I mean, imagine if you don't have a car and you live in an apartment and you've got no proper, or multifamily, you've got no proper place to store your garbage, nor anywhere to create one. You'd just be on the receiving end of bears and the city.
If I may, these rules are for the curbside people, curbside residents, which go up to 4-plex multiplexes, but apartments are not considered, they do not get this type of collection, and thus they would not be, ruled under this.
Thank you.
But up to 4-plexes would be.
Yeah, which under Bill 44 raises the specter of an increased number of dwelling units on every site across our community, and therefore, a potential significant challenge on both the compliance and enforcement side.
And one further point is that, we do have those 24/7 dumpsters available in town. So if people see that they are getting harassed by bears or they don't have space, they can always use those at any point in time, at any hour of the day, to get rid of their trash.
So I would turn to our corporate officer and the conversation here about the language. Do we need to, how do we advance this question specifically?
Sorry, well, as the current bylaw is written, the first paragraph, the occupants are responsible for the proper and sanitary storage of carts and wildlife attractants on their property. Is the language within the bylaw as
draft,
it is?
Yeah.
If council wishes to amend that before it's given readings, then we would take an amendment to that, or take a direction to make the amendment from council. Otherwise, it would be the one that's presented on the agenda.
Attached to the report. Okay. With that, I guess you can continue, Ms. Line, and we'll deal with that when we get to the end.
Thank you. So fourth item is following up on a request from our February Committee of the Whole I researched the best time to bring carts to the curb for pickup. And my big focus was to look at what the BC Bear Smart Community Program was suggesting, and also what the communities that have been certified Bear Smart in BC have done. And unfortunately, it's across the board. So the community program suggested 5 a.m., which is what we have currently in our bylaw, but the communities themselves is everywhere from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. So just to follow along with the program rules, I kept to the 5 a.m. And that did not change in the bylaw then. If I scroll, sorry, I'm learning so much about this reader view. Okay, pardon me. So the second bylaw that I had to update was the municipal ticket information bylaw, and there was very little to update there. It's just the references to the waste regulation bylaw were updated, so they made sense with all the changes that went into the waste regulation bylaw. And so on your screen is 2 options. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Line. I had one question about, and was it in the bylaw or the, I can't remember, but cat litter being an organic?
Yes.
That surprised me.
That small amounts of cat litter will be accepted into the program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it'll decompose and compost and.
I honestly do not know a lot about cat
Nor do
litter,
I.
like the stuff. I don't know what it's made of, so I can't really comment more than that, but they accepted it.
Okay, thank you. So I'll turn to, we have 2 options in front of us. I turn to council, to council's pleasure on this. Any comments, questions? Does anyone want to move the bylaw? Councilor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just quick clarifying question. So if I understood Officer McConnell correctly, the less punitive language would be option.
Yeah, as in the amended
Okay.
bylaw. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So in this section 4.6, the occupant of a parcel is responsible for the cost of any damage to caused by willful or accidental damage to the cart. Did we have that before? Was that in the bylaw before?
If I may, yes, that's something we
Yeah.
changed last year when we brought in the Recycle BC. Yeah, that we changed that then.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you.
Looking around the room. Okay, thank
I'll
you.
move the.
I'll second.
Could you read option?
It's not, the options aren't quite right up there.
Okay.
but,
Oh, pardon me.
The staff recommendation, I'll read the staff recommendation as presented with the bylaw that's attached is
Okay.
what, that consolidated waste regulation bylaw number 1845, amendment bylaw number 2512, 2024 be given first and second reading.
Moved by Councilor Nixon, seconded by Councilor Hamilton. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.
And the second recommendation is that consolidated municipal ticket information bylaw number 2041, amendment bylaw number 2513, 2024 be given first and second reading.
Councilor Hamilton, moved, seconded by Councilor Nixon. Any further discussion on that? That part of it seemed pretty straightforward. Councilor Shoesmith.
We are going with the old language, not the new. Or, never mind, sorry.
The less punitive language, yes. Yeah. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Line. Item 11. A report from our Deputy Fire Chief, Mr. Robinson.
Worship Council. it. I seem to be having some difficulty here. Something changed, I think. Yeah, no. Share screen. That one. Oh, there. Ah. Sorry about that.
Not at all.
So many different software programs I use. Your Worship, Council, I'm here tonight to ask for support in a grant application. Another tongue twister. It's the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund for Disaster Risk Reduction. No mistake there. Climate Adaptation Grant. Okay, so I'll start a little project overview for while we're applying for this grant. This grant is a 2-year grant, and it allows us to apply for funds to update our hazard risk vulnerability analysis and our emergency plans related specifically to climate readiness. What they don't allow us to do is use the grants to do a hazard risk vulnerability analysis for anything that's not climate related. So I'll be touching on that as we move through. But we have a bit of a schedule there. In November 2023, the Emergency and Disaster Management Act received royal assent and came into being. And so at that point, I then took it up with myself and the Emergency Management Committee to review our current set of documents, which has highlighted some shortcomings in those documents with relation to this new act. And so a grant came available where we can use some of that money to address some of those issues. And so the first phase is done up to February 2024. And then moving forward, if we're successful in this grant application and council approves us applying for this grant, the plan is to then start with a hazard risk vulnerability analysis in the first 12 months. That's from May 2024 to May 2025. Alongside that, we would also work on a generic emergency management plan. That plan would just contain everything that is relevant to every emergency, if you will. And then as part of the hazard risk vulnerability analysis, that would identify the risks that the city may face in an emergency. And then we can start to address the risk-specific plans. And the plan is that the emergency management plan will then contain a set of appendices that refer to the various risks, wildfire, flood, so on. And so it'll start to address those in October this year onwards. Up until December 2025, sort of an 18-month timescale. And in there, we've built a contingency buffer of 5 to 6 months because always happens, best laid plans, you have these timescales, and then something happens and you get delayed. So our aim is to have it finished by the end of 2025, but as a grant's a 2-year grant, it has provided us with some leniency there to extend beyond that. So these are the proposed documents that we sort of think we might need. The hazard risk vulnerability analysis will identify what is needed, but our sort of gut feeling on this is what we'll need to review. And what we've got there is our current plans and when they were last updated. So I need to go through everything, but you can see the HRVA was nearly 10 years old, as is our management response plan. The key word being their response. One of the requirements of EDMA is that it's a 4 pillars approach, which is mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And our current plan is specifically around response. We currently don't really have an interface fire plan or wildland fire, but we do have our CWPP, which is from 2018, which has a lot of that information in it. Our flood plan is very much up to date, and in fact was reviewed this morning again, and has some further updates based on last 12 months' work. Extreme temperature and drought. Those are ideal plans for this grant because they are climate related and we don't have plans yet for those. Extreme temperature is both hot and cold, so that would be a warming center and perhaps cooling stations in the summer. And then the last few plans on there are plans that really aren't covered by the grant because they're not climate related. So hazardous materials release, pandemic, train derailment, comms plan, which is pretty much up to date. Wouldn't take a lot to update that, and our evacuation plan. And then a further requirement of EDMA is that we have a business continuity plan. We don't necessarily have that specifically. The thinking is that as we move through this process, the business continuity will just evolve, and at the end of it, we'll have a business continuity plan as well.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm curious why we're not classifying as pandemics as potentially climate related, because my understanding is that they're expecting a lot more pandemics in the future as a result of climate change and various animal migration, and such.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Hamilton. That's a good question. It's one of those 50-50. I think it sort of depends what side of the bed the evaluators get out of on a day. We will go back to them once we know the extent of what we need to do for pandemic and inquire of them.
Yeah, weirdly, even train derailment. There was an incident on the Fording River sub where the train derailed because of extreme heat, and the tracks actually sort of expanded, didn't hold the train. So there is the potential that it seems to me tie each of these to climate change.
I would agree, Your Worship. We did actually approach UBCM and ask the question on the wording in the application and what they considered eligible tasks for this. And they specifically came back and said trail derailment is not.
Okay. Yeah.
That was the example they actually used.
Fair enough.
So with regards to the grant itself, the grant is broken up into 3 categories, they call it. Category 1, which is foundational activities, which is what the area we're applying under. Category 2, which is non-structural remediation, and Category 3, which is small-scale structural. We did consider applying under Category 2, but we didn't have the capacity at this time. And also in talking with the UBCM, we weren't far enough the way down Category 1 for them to approve this. So we need to go through Category 1, which is the foundational activities, which is preparing the plans. We need to put in those plans, for example, that we might need to get air scrubbers to clear smoke or air conditioning units for a cooling center. Once they can see that in a plan, then they would accept us applying under Category 2. And also applying under Category 2, then perhaps as capital investments, and there's a whole different area. So at this stage, we're just applying under the Category 1 planning phase. Category 1 does allow up to 150,000 maximum. We're asking for 85,000 from UBCM, and that is broken up as $30,000 for staff hours. That's approximately 400 hours of time. 50,000 in consultant fees or qualified professionals. That, for example, maybe a hydrologist if we decide we need to review some of our flood plans or something like that. And then some public information costs as well. So that's the grant side from UBCM for this particular grant. As I said, that's purely climate related. As part of this project, we're doing an all hazards review and looking at all our plans. And so we do have some other grants that we can also use for this project. We currently have a $32,000 grant, or 32,000 allocation under our Fire Smart grant for a community wildfire resiliency plan. And whilst that is not an emergency plan, basically all the work that would go into creating that, the information coming out of that would then allow us to create a wildfire plan. We also received a grant called the Indigenous Engagement Requirement Grant. Another requirement of EDMA is that we engage with our First Nations partners, and the province were aware of that, and they just provided that 40,000. That's why we've not been in front of council asking for that money. We just got a letter saying, send this letter back and we'll provide you the 40,000 to do Indigenous engagement. And so we think we can use some of that grant money for that component of meeting with our First Nations partners. And then finally, as I say, it's an all hazards approach. And so we are going to look at some non-climate related plans. And we see that could take up to $30,000 in staff time. I'm not asking for more money there. That staff time is just the normal staff time of the working day. It's a 2-year project, so there's plenty of time to factor that in. And what I'm actually going to do is we're going to focus on the climate-related stuff first. And the reason for that is this particular grant has a 6-month cycle. I do know there's been a lot of grumblings by other municipalities that it's specifically climate-related, and specifically HRVA should be a whole hazards approach. You should not just be doing one component of it. And UBCM have received a lot of feedback that this grant should cover all hazards. And so it may not happen, but we're sort of hedging our bets. And so if we do the climate-related stuff first, maybe in 6 months or 12 months, if the money's still there, they'll change the terms of the grant, at which point we can apply again for our non-climate related. So we're trying to be strategic in how we approach that. So it could be that we need the city, we have to use staff time, but we may be able to get around that. But regardless, it's something we need to do to meet the requirements of EDMA. It makes sense to do it now for cost efficiencies. If you do it all as one big project, it's better than doing it piecemeal and repeating time. So just want to make you aware of that, but it's not an ask for $30,000. It's just that there may be time for that.
Thank you.
And I'm open to questions.
Council? How sure, is this a slam dunk, or are we, this grant application, are we 50-50 or 60-40? How are we feeling about it?
Your worship, it's definitely not a slam dunk. We've put forward rationale. Basically, I'll just backstep a bit. The grant has an eligible activity, and all the grants have this, called incremental staff hours. But nobody actually will define what an incremental staff hour is. Whether incremental means over and above the 35-hour week, or whether it means incremental to your job description. We've argued, or will argue in our rationale, that it's incremental to job description. As an emergency program coordinator and as an emergency management committee, we have an obligation to put together, to oversee the program. But the scope of writing plans probably doesn't fall under our job description.
Right.
We don't have enough, we don't allow enough time in our daily jobs to do that. And what I challenge UBCM with is, if we were to go out and get a consultant to do this, they'd probably not quibble it. But we feel we've got the skills internally, or the knowledge is internal. If you've got a consultant, you've still got staff time because they have to come in and have meetings with staff and so on. So it's more efficient to use the staff internally for this. So we'll put together a rationale that we hope defends our case that $30,000 in staff time is incremental staff time, and we'll just have to wait and see. If we don't get it, then I guess we apply again in October under different wording. So it's not a slam dunk. I'm more than 50-50. I think the rationale is good. I just don't know how the evaluators will.
Yeah. Well,
we'll see it.
Well, thank you for that. I absolutely agree. It's worth it. Are there other granting streams with the Emergency Management Act update? Are there other granting streams to support communities with the updates to that act?
Your worship, not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
We did get that in Indigenous Engagement Requirement Grant.
Okay.
Which is only for 12 months. We have to report by the end of March 2025. Again, a lot of municipalities have raised concerns about that, and that it would overwhelm the First Nations, especially if the 8 or 10 municipalities in the Out Valley alone, you know, go to Yakitingakleet and Ackham and Nikiskuna to engage with them and to spend that $40,000. So there is questions being asked of UBCM that we can perhaps, can we extend that into a 2-year grant? Not heard back on that.
Okay.
But as regards additional grants, nothing is available yet. But that's why we're also looking at working on our climate related stuff first, so that if more grants do come out down the line, we can look to apply for those for the stuff that isn't covered under this grant.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, because I think that is very strategic, because there is a lot of noise in the province about support for these updates to the Act and communities not being positioned or having the resources to respond. So well done for you. If there are no other questions from council, I'll ask Mr. McConnell to read the recommendation.
Thank you. The recommendation is that council endorse an application to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, UBCM, under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, CEPF, Disaster Risk Reduction Climate Adaptation, DRRCA grant to support the City of Fernie Emergency Management Committee for the purpose of reviewing and updating the Hazard, Risk, and Vulnerability Analysis, HRVA document, and associated climate-related emergency management plans, and that the City of Fernie Emergency Management Committee be authorized to provide overall grant management for the project.
Moved by Councillor Adia Kelly, seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you, Deputy Chief.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council, and I apologize for the abbreviations and tongue twister.
Moving on to item 13, other business. A notice of motion presented by Councillor Hamilton, and I'll ask the corporate officer to read the motion.
Thank you, Worship. The motion is, be it resolved that council directs staff to bring back a report on the impacts to operational budget and work plans and proceeding with the public-private partnership for installation of EV charging stations at the skate park and how to ensure that the opportunity is open to other potential interested parties.
Are you willing to move it, Councillor Hamilton?
I will move that.
A seconder? Councillor Adia Kelly, discussion. Councillor Hamilton, would you like to speak to your motion?
Certainly, thanks. I mean, as we all were aware, we were presented with the opportunity by a private corporation to install EV charging stations at the skate park. I feel that it's a perfect opportunity to add more infrastructure that will support tourism, that will support the downtown commercial core, our transition to a lower carbon future. And before we commit as a community to any one particular entity, I would like to just kind of understand what the implications of that are and hope that we can potentially use this as a bit of a framework for other locations in the future.
Other comments from council? I am curious, like, I appreciate the intent of this, but I don't know how to frame this. We're not exactly having folks beat down our door to provide us with infrastructure that they will pay for, maintain, and then give us money for the use of. I'm curious what more we're hoping to achieve in this, except to say I did appreciate there was a comment about entering into a contract with this one supplier, and I wonder if there isn't potentially due diligence to be done on this one supplier, and then potentially move ahead with the first party who's come to offer us this. We haven't seen this before. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. As it looks right now, it looks quite peachy for us. There's no cost, no risk, nothing, some slight income stream. That's great. But of course, the devil will be in the details of whatever contract is presented. And I mean, Councillor Hamilton's motion might direct staff into this and they'll just come back and say, yeah, it's peachy and great, or they might say, not so much. So I think it's a good motion.
Councillor Adia Kelly and then Councillor Nixon.
Thanks, Your Worship. I took Councillor Hamilton to also be interested in being fair and transparent. And that's why I also supported his motion. It seems prudent. I agree with you. We don't have anyone else beating down our door. And as Councillor Shoesmith pointed out, staff might come back and say, this is great. But I do think it's good to do the due diligence and be transparent.
Yeah, sorry. It's not that I disagree. I was just raising that as a point. Like, it's the first people have come to offer it to us, and now we're potentially going to go out and look for more where we may not find anyone. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't do that. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. I agree. I think it's, there aren't a lot of people beating down the door, right? And to say that for the third time here. But maybe there is a path here forward if we were to even change this a little bit and not just say at the charging stations at the skate park, but just in Fernie in general. I mean, that would be one of the things, because there's going to be probably more DC fast charging that's going to come, that we're going to need in the downtown area as well. So yeah, there's not a lot of people out there, I'm sure, that, right now, but maybe eventually.
Mr. Boranowski.
Thank you, Your Worship. The only item I want to flag for council is that, and I think Councillor Nixon touched on it, the resolution is written in a way that you'll get the impacts on our budget and work plans in proceeding with a public-private partnership, and a report on how we would ensure the opportunity is open to other potential interested parties. It doesn't meet the request of the individual who came, nor does it meet the budget or operational constraints and projects that were already on the table. And so along with that, just so that you're aware, will come notice on, okay, this person was working on this and is now doing that. Only reason being, this is a interesting, compelling project that came in, and it's now directing reallocation of your resources of the organization. Not that that's a bad thing, but you need to have your eyes open if you're doing that. That likely then we are pulling someone from something else to do something that wasn't on anybody's priority list and didn't make it up as a formal project previously. So just as a caution.
Which is true ultimately in either event, right? Like whether we go with the single supplier, to your point, we've then created a private partnership to advance, or we are taking up staff time to look at for other potential suppliers or other models. I don't know if this is maybe something we can turn as members of the Community Energy Association, turn to them and say, are there a suite of examples where this has been a success in communities across Western Canada, rather than taking up staff time in either event before we move on this. Get them to do some homework on our behalf. We are members of that organization.
Your Worship and Council, we certainly can ask the Community Energy Association to provide a document or a presentation to council and staff on opportunities for electrification or vehicle charging. I'm not aware of what they've got, but they are, they're deeply entwined in that space. So it may be useful. And again, that's just another perfectly within your purview and within your power to reprioritize that over other things, but be aware that that's just a brand new, net new project, right? To start bringing in another initiative. So we'll, however that moves ahead by the resolution, happy to do it.
Yeah, you'll forgive me. It doesn't seem like a lot of work though to send an email to the Community Energy Association to summarize what we've been told in this circumstance and to say, have you seen examples of this elsewhere? That in my mind doesn't necessarily create a project unless what comes back is substantial and we see an opportunity there.
You're correct. That's not a project. The resolution as it's written, I would see as a small project of staff to write a staff report, spend time peer reviewing it and get it through the publication process, but not particularly onerous. It's just a net new project that arose that doesn't quite respond to what was presented by the delegation as a time-derated opportunity, but is likely more publicly defensible and transparent.
Yeah, understood. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I appreciate the sentiment that Councillor Hamilton has brought this forward with. But my preference at this juncture would be, I'm not speaking for council, this not to create a net new project, but to inquire about, through the organization that we are members of, if they can provide us with examples where they have seen this work in other jurisdictions, and potentially other suppliers, such that we have a broader sense of what's happening in other communities so that we're not jumping into a project unnecessarily. Thoughts, Councillor Nixon?
Thank you, Worship. I'm just curious about I know that you mentioned this before, but about the 20-year sort of contract, if Mr. McConnell has kind of looked into that or not. I mean, that was problematic at the time, it was mentioned, but just curious about that 20-year contract.
Well, I can't speak for Mr. McConnell. I suspect he hasn't looked into it because he saw this notice of motion and accordingly was waiting for the outcome here. Councillor Shoesmith.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan. You've kind of swayed me around there a little bit. I'm all in favor of jumping in both feet, except that I definitely don't want to see us with some goofy contract or something for 20 years. I mean, there's no risk, really, unless there's something weird there.
Councillor Hamilton.
I certainly agree with your point about we're not having people banging on our doors for these projects. My preference would be to just move forward with that sole supplier that was presented to us. However, I think in the interest of public transparency and defensible decision-making, that was the rationale for why I brought this motion forward. And I agree, a quick email to the CEA to say, hey, what else has happened in the province? What examples can you do? How easy is this going to be for us is kind of the summation of what I'm looking for as far as a report, or hoping for as far as a report. It's not necessarily a full-blown project, research project. So I think with that discussion points in mind, hopefully that is what staff brings us back and we're able to make a decision to move forward and get this project done sooner than later.
Thank you. Mr. McConnell, we have a motion on the floor. What's our next move here? Defeat this motion or amend it such that it achieves what Councillor Hamilton was suggesting without overburdening staff in terms of creating a project?
Thank you, Your Worship. Number one, a referral to staff is always appropriate and can be done at any point in time with a notice of motion. However, referral to staff just means, what's the impact on staff to bring back a report in this case. Number two, you can amend the motion that's on the floor to direct, rather than a full staff report, just direct staff to inquire of the Community Energy Association, or you can defeat this motion and bring that motion up. But I would submit that that's potentially a net new motion and goes back into our notice of motion process, may not be what council wants to do. So depending on council's choice today, they can either advance this motion as it stands or make amendments to it such as they would like to direct, or direct it to staff for review prior to making a decision.
Councillor Hamilton and then Councillor McIsaac.
If I may make a motion to amend my motion, that we amend it rather than bring back a report to bring back a response, so that it doesn't have to be a full report, and that we also remove the word skate park and just say the city.
Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Just following along with the discussion, I actually think I would move to table this notice of motion and instead advance a motion to staff to do the CEA outreach and bring back that information, and then we can re-enter the discussion and voting portion of this motion.
Yeah, that feels cleaner to me. Table this motion for now and then introduce that second motion as you suggested.
I'll make that motion. I will need a secondary.
Councillor Shoesmith.
So
Mr. McConnell.
just so we're clear, there was no, did Councillor Hamilton actually make an amendment motion without a second, or is that just a?
He suggested an amendment, but
Okay.
it
wasn't a formal
seconded.
motion.
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's a motion to table by Councillor McIsaac.
Is there a seconder? Oh, Councillor Shoesmith. Thank you. All in favor? That's unanimous. And the next motion was to
Just
be able to
to-
capture that.
Councillor McIsaac, if we can repeat that, please.
And please feel free to amend this, but my takeaway from the discussion was really what we were looking for was for staff to do some outreach to the Community Energy Association on our behalf to bring back some information that would inform that decision.
Seconder, Councillor Audia Kelly. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
But
No, it's fine. I will capture that language for sure. I had that direct staff to outreach the Community Energy Association on our behalf to regarding the matter of provision of EV charge in the community via public-private partnerships would be the language.
Yeah.
I did have one question around
Absolutely.
the timeline of when we might expect that response, knowing that the presenter had a timeline as a result of granting and funding, and so making sure that time is of the essence and that we are able to proceed and move forward with this in a timely manner, so that we're basically not risking losing out on this opportunity because of delays on our side.
Mr. Baranowski.
I have a follow-up with one of our key contacts at the CEA on Monday on a number of specific issues, and I'll add that to the agenda and see if we can address it then. If it looks like it's going to be an extended timeline, I'll inform the mayor next week of that estimation, and the timeline of a response or of a presentation or assessment from the CEA can be brought back right away.
Thank you. Is that satisfactory? Okay, thank you. And I did want to, Councillor Hamilton, I did want to reiterate, I salute the spirit in which you brought that forward in terms of transparency and openness and public engagement on these issues. And so thank you for that. But I don't want to create more of a project than is necessary at this juncture until we have more information. So thank you.
If I may, Your Worship,
please,
and I apologize. I'm
No.
pretty sure you called the question, but I want to make sure you actually called the question on that. And was it unanimous?
It was.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. It's good to check. This brings us to item 14.1. Correspondence from Fernie Tourism regarding the MRDT renewal request. And they were seeking a resolution in support of their renewal. And we have before us, informed by the conversation that council had last time, and in a back and forth with Tourism Fernie, we have a proposed resolution in front of us. And sorry.
I'd say it's a response, not a resolution.
Okay. Well, they require a resolution. Yeah. And so what are you saying?
So I'm sorry, the resolution would be to provide a letter of support, and your document that you provided is a proposed response letter of support. That's what I'm saying, which you would need a resolution to allow you to send.
Okay. So in terms of framing the, because I'd like to deal with this now if we could. So I would seek a resolution in support of this response, incorporated in a letter of support to Tourism Fernie. Correct?
Yes, that sounds exactly like what you're, yeah.
Okay.
Would you like me to read out the proposed response?
Please.
Okay, so, and it's been provided to council, is developed by His Worship, that Mayor and Council of the City of Fernie support Tourism Fernie's application to renew the municipal and regional district tax collected in the Fernie area for another 5-year term covering 2025 to 2029. And further, that Mayor and Council will enter into a collaborative dialogue with the Board of Directors of Tourism Fernie to elaborate on and potentially expand the uses of MRDT, and more specifically OAP MRDT funds as allowed by legislation, including the application of those funds toward the provision and support of affordable housing to meet the needs of the citizens of Fernie, and that the City of Fernie supports direct collaboration on Project Plan 8 as priority, and that destination management and development efforts be undertaken with a strong focus on life cycle and asset management to ensure the long-term sustainability of assets services, and the community's appreciation for tourism is a key driver of our economy, and that the city of Fernie supports direct collaboration with Tourism Fernie on the early development of the next resort development strategy under the Resort Municipality Initiative Funding Program, including more effective tourism industry engagement, along with collaboration and support on its submission to the province and implementation once approved by the province.
Comments, questions? Councillor Hamilton.
Two questions or comments, perhaps. OAP MRDT. What is OAP? I'm pretty sure I know it's online accommodation provider, but it would have been
Online
nice.
accommodation platforms, I believe, is, yeah,
Okay.
the specific acronym.
Would have been nice to have that written out.
Fair enough. We will write it out in the letter.
Thank you. And what is Project Plan 8?
Well, I'll look at Mr. Barnowski because I opened their document and I haven't looked at it since. I don't have it in front of me.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to open up the strategic plan and re-reference that in a minute. I wasn't prepared for the question. If you give me 1 moment on that. The one piece that I would like to reflect on in the formal response for council's consideration is that this letter is specific to Tourism Fernie's strategic plan and the endorsement for the ongoing collection of the municipal regional district tax, the MRDT, and the online accommodator platform component of that. And that I don't know, I'm not suggesting that we are not going to engage with Tourism Fernie as a sector representative or the tourism sector more broadly on the resort municipality initiative, but it is a separate program and perhaps not as germane to a response specifically about support for the destination marketing organization to continue receiving the municipal regional district tax and the online accommodator platform. It just may not be the right arena to make that commitment again, but of course we do commit to working directly with Tourism Fernie and others, including nations, on the establishment of our recurring resort development strategies when they get when they are developed. But if you give me 1 moment, I will look up strategic item 8. I don't want to misspeak on the wrong item in the draft plan.
I can't ask you. You're making, I appreciate that you know, have it on the tip of your tongue, but. No, sorry.
If I may, Your
Barnowski.
Worship, and thank you for your patience on this. Specifically, this is about the events, festival, and animation, sport competitions, meeting, and conventions. That's Project Plan 8. We are already directly involved collaboratively and as a co-funder of the tourism event strategy, and want to see continuing to work very closely together on this because we are, as council is, keenly aware of the real constraints on our building's capacity to support, as in our bylaw, community use, youth programming, as well as then animation and events. And we are keenly aware of the community partners' capacity to deliver it. However, we are extremely supportive of working very collaboratively with Tourism Fernie on this specific strategy and advancing a number of the tactics listed in this specific initiative, including determining the right method to champion and resource the development of events and animation activities that doesn't overburden our community partners or look to the city of Fernie where it may not be the most appropriate event delivery tool.
Right. Yeah. And to your comments on the fourth paragraph, if we are committed to this anyway, I see no need not to commit to it in this letter in terms of communicating our, overusing the word commit, communicating our commitment to an open and collaborative relationship with Tourism Fernie. I see no reason why we wouldn't commit to that in our letter in support of their renewal.
Certainly, my only comment is we also are committed to engaging with them on the official community plan or a Parks and Recreation master plan or public consultation on the budget and others, whereas this is a letter of support specific to the MRDT plan. And so I would personally recommend trying to keep it focused on their master plan and the MRDT element. But council is welcome to make that commitment. And it is something that we are required by the province and invested in directly consulting and engaging on.
Yeah, and I take your point, but you know, this was a collaborative effort with Tourism Fernie to develop this language in terms of our response. And so, you know, I'm supportive of their intent here. And I, you know, as we are required to commit to this anyway, I see no risk to committing it to it here in this letter.
Certainly. It was just a consideration I wanted to flag.
No, thank you. Other comments? Councilor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question. This might be with regards to Mr. Boranowski's comment about having the Resort Municipality Initiative Funding Program included in the paragraph. On my read on that, and I've read it several times now, it doesn't actually speak very much to that, other than the fact that the funding program would be appropriate with the resort development strategy. So I'm not sure that there is any mixing of the two going on here, other than referencing it as a funding support for accomplishing that.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to make sure if Mr. Boranowski had a different concern other than that.
No concern. It's just a specific letter of support for Tourism Fernie's application to continue being the authorized recipient for this specific municipal and regional district tax mechanism.
Fair enough. And I took your worship. I took away from the previous comments that the picture is bigger than that as far as our relationship with Tourism Fernie, but this is the specific things associated with this letter and agreed upon wording.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Then, Your Worship, I would recommend that you get a letter of support, or to send this letter of support.
Can I need a motion for that?
Yeah, a motion to approve the letter of support.
Councillor Shoesmith, seconded by Councillor Audie Kelly. Any other comments? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Sorry, gentlemen. There's a bit of a wall between us here. Awesome. That moves us on to item 15, reports from council members. I'll start with Councillor Shoesmith.
Not a ton. Everything is awesome. That's all.
Excellent. Councillor Nixon.
Thank you, Worship. So I did attend the Tourism Fernie AGM, and I'd like to congratulate them on running such a good and a clean AGM, and to their entire team. That it looks like they have a really strong team there. I was also very interested in the prospect of Tourism Fernie wanting to take over the building, and that was really I was really had a big grin on my face about that one as well. So that would be fantastic. I saw that as an incredible opportunity. I also attended the Knowing Water Symposium put on by the Elk River Collaborative last week. Kudos to project manager Joanna Line, who gave a great summary of the history of drinking water in our community and answered many difficult questions. One of the questions that came up from the symposium was about data sharing, but it was implied that the city does not share our data with the rest of the collaborative and our community. And I was kind of shocked about that, but maybe, I don't know if staff can answer that. I mean,
If I may. So the question was actually about the annual water report, and that is available online on fernie.ca. The most recent one isn't available yet. It's just been sent to the regulators, but whenever it is approved, we do put it online. So that specific report is available, but I believe that person wanted specific data and that is within the water report, but maybe the one that isn't available yet. So.
Thank you very much. You did a great job at Knowing Water. That was great. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Audie Kelly.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was fortunate to attend the Chamber Business Banter and Beer that Rotary and Park Place Lodge and Chamber co-hosted with some of my fellow councillors. And I also attended the Tourism AGM, and I would very much like to thank the tourism group for, I thought was an awesome day. One of the things that the keynote speaker said that I felt was a great takeaway and good advice for council was say what you are going to do, measure and deliver. That really struck home for me. And then I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some of our amazing youth in Fernie, of which our youth counselor Dylan is one. But I just wanted to say that I am continually impressed with the super amazing things that they're doing. We've got from the slopes to the pool to the courts to the ice. We've got people on the podium. We've got gold medal winners and all of those things, archery, shooting. We've got recording studios, television, medals at the BC Winter Games, cadets. Like I've been incredibly impressed for the last few months with the achievements of our youth. And I think we're incredibly lucky. And I think that also speaks to their mentors, their coaches, their parents. So I just wanted to give a shout out to all of our Fernie youth. I think they're pretty amazing. And thanks, Your Worship.
No, thank you for that. Speaking of youth Councillor Annis.
I would just like to remind everybody that April is organ donation month. And so I encourage everybody just to reflect on their organ donation status. On a more lighter note, the Youth Advisory Committee had its second meeting yesterday. We've been planning some projects that could potentially unite the two school systems, as there is currently a bit of a divide, as well as we're going over kind of just a general, how does council meetings operate? Just because that's a very intimidating thing. And I think that could be one of the main reasons as to why we don't see a whole lot of youth coming out here and participating in that public participation period. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you be bringing your committee to a meeting at some point?
Yeah, so I'm doing some traveling soon. And so as I'm away, my plan is to try and have someone new on the committee each week come in to say a few things on the agenda.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor McIsaac.
Thank you, Worship. I too was fortunate to attend the Chamber's BBB at the Park Place, and it was a lovely space and very nice to see a very engaged business community there. I was also very fortunate to represent council as the deputy mayor at the Tourism Fernie AGM. It was very well attended, very well run. I'd like to especially congratulate the new board members, and I'm confident that Tourism Fernie is in good hands. I also want to congratulate Mike Delich, who was honored at the event for a very long and illustrious career supporting the ski industry and development in Fernie, and it was very well deserved, and I think people really appreciate it. I'm sure he did as well. It was marvelous. And other than that, I just wanted to mention that my organ donation status is not yet.
But he's open to offers. Councillor Hamilton.
Tough act to follow. I was at the Business Beers and Banter at the Park Place as well, along with my colleagues. The Tourism Fernie AGM. Not going to rehash all the compliments that have already been said. Would like to wish the Ghost Riders good luck. They're currently a little bit behind in their series, and I'm sure they're going to turn it around. But also remind everybody in the community that Fernie Minor Hockey is currently in the running for a $75,000 grant from Kruger. So go to the Kruger Big Assist webpage and vote for Fernie to win up to $100,000.
Excellent. Thank you. I unfortunately was away. Well, not unfortunately, I was away for the last week, but unfortunately missed both the Business Beer and Banter and the Tourism Fernie AGM. But thank you, Councillor McIsaac, for covering. And yeah, thank you for youth, Councillor Annis. Like you've really sort of stepped up in terms of building relationships with youth in the community. So thank you for that. That's really impressive. So with all that you have on your plate as a grade 12 student and including amongst other things, university applications and scholarship applications, well done. It's to be commended, and yeah, my organ donation status is active. So yeah, should something happen to me, yeah, rush to harvest my organs. But beyond that, I don't have anything else to report. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening, and thank you, Council, for, as always, for a robust conversation. And thank you, staff who attended this evening. Good night, everybody.